Hello, Facebook family and friends. This is Assemblywoman Suzette Martinez Valladares. I'm so excited to be talking to you today about a few things. The first being that I am running for re-election in the 40th Assembly District, which, if you're not familiar, is now a newly redrawn district after redistricting. So our old boundaries in the 38th Assembly District used to include Santa Clarita, not all of Santa Clarita. It included the San Fernando Valley as well as Simi Valley, and the new 40th district will only include more of the wonderful San Fernando Valley, everything actually down to Roscoe, including my old alma mater, Cal State Northridge. We will also have all of Santa Clarita. So I couldn't be more excited about running in the 40th Assembly District, quite literally the district that built me. From the community that I was born in, Granada Hills Hospital, to going my first job at Six Flags Magic Mountain. Y'all know I was there for 8 years, so it wasn't just a summer job for me. To my time at College of the Canyons and then Cal State Northridge, to meeting my husband and having my daughter in Santa Clarita. This community is truly my community and made me, is a huge part of the reason that I am the person I am today. I'm so excited to also announce that I have officially received the endorsement of the Los Angeles Protective League. And it's such an honor for me, given that my father-in-law is a former LAPD detective. Some of my best friends still work for the department. And it's truly one of the top-notch law enforcement departments in the world, definitely in my opinion, that works so hard to keep our community safe. So I wanted to talk to y'all a little bit about LAPPL, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, with our director, Dave Abduladian, and I probably botched his name, but he's going to help me there in just a minute. I want to talk about who they are, some of the challenges that they've been facing, and yes, obviously something that we are seeing every single day in our community, the rise in crime, and how legislators, especially legislators in Sacramento, all need to step up to the plate to keep our community safe. The sole purpose of government is to keep its people safe. It's to protect them from violence, both foreign and domestic. And unfortunately, we are failing. There are way too many crimes happening. There are way too many new victims every single day, and it has got to change. So now, without further ado, I'd like to bring on Dave. Dave, I probably butchered your last name. I apologize for that. So will you just please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who the Los Angeles Police Protective League are?
Hi, thank you. Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Dave Abduladian. I'm one of the directors here for the Los Angeles Police Protective League. We are the union that represents approximately 9,500 members. We're here for pay, benefits, legal rights, and working conditions of our Los Angeles police officers, lieutenants, and below. We do things like contract ratification, as well as advocate for public safety laws, such as yourself. We have meetings discussing some of the laws that are up for vote, some of the unintended consequences, as well as some of the benefits of some of the laws. So political advocacy is one of the things that we do.
So Dave, you are now full-time with LAPPL. So for those of y'all, it is the Los Angeles Police Protective League, but as you can tell, that's a mouthful. So if I refer to it as LAPPL, y'all know what I'm talking about. So you're full-time with LAPPL now, and doing all the things wonderful things you just described. But before that, you were an officer. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to go into law enforcement and where you served.
Yeah, thank you. I watching the TV shows growing up, things like Hill Street Blues, Spencer for Hire. There was such a romanticized image with police officers. Of course, Adam 12, Dragnet, the older shows. I always wanted to do something like that, help people, and didn't want to sit in an office. Something unconventional, challenging, and that's why I wanted to become a police officer. I came out to Los Angeles in '97. Joined the department there, here, served in West Valley Division, Foothill Division, Hollywood Division, actually all over the city. I worked as an officer, field training officer, detective, and a sergeant. I worked undercover in Vice, dealing with human trafficking, victims of human trafficking, as well as drug addicted people and homelessness in Central.
Wow, Dave. Well, one, I did notice that every once in a while you either have a little New York or New Jersey accent that comes out. And forgive me, I'm not an East Coast girl. Boston, I was totally wrong. Totally wrong, but that's okay. We are happy to have you. So interesting that you would mention human trafficking. I don't think enough people understand just how bad human trafficking is. And I think a lot of people think of human trafficking as, you know, stuff you see in the movies, or this international trafficking of women and girls, like from Thailand or from Eastern Europe. But actually, we have a huge problem of domestic women and children being trafficked in the United States. And California is actually one of the top, Los Angeles is one of the top 10 cities in which girls and women are trafficked. It just kind of blows my mind. I actually have a bill in the state assembly that I have co-authored or joint authored with Assemblyman Jordan Cunningham that seeks to address human trafficking as it pertains to hotels and motels. What our bill will do is, if a motel or hotel employee knows that human trafficking is going on, they are obligated to report it. It's kind of like the mandated reporter concept, but for human trafficking. In your experience, what can we be doing better? What's actually happening on the streets? What can parents do to prevent their children from being a predator's meat for human trafficking?
Well, like you said, just be aware, especially the hotels workers, restaurant industry, club workers, to be more attentive to the person and seeing the look in that person's eyes, if there's fear or uncertainty, and making it a mandated reporter. I think it's a great first step. As far as parents, pay attention to your kids. Know what they're doing online. Know what they're doing on their cell phones. It's such a complicated issue. We want to give our kids some leeway, some rope to grow and learn, but also they're still kids. I mean, I remember when I was 16 compared to now, and the things that I thought back then that I knew, and realizing how much I really don't know. And even now, I mean, how much I don't know. We need to really pay attention to what our kids are doing online. There's so many predators, and it's just a horrific crime. We're really starting to be a lot more understanding that these kids and even adults are victims of human trafficking, and that they're not treated as suspects or prostitutes like they used to be, where they were arrested. I think now we use the law as a means of an interruption. We use the ability to arrest someone to get them out of their circumstances and then offer them hope. It's a forced almost timeout that we get them out. It's no longer a punitive issue. It's more of a helping issue. So thank you for bringing attention to that.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the most heartbreaking no votes I took was last year. And before I get into that, I will say that there's a lot of pieces of legislation coming out of the legislature right now that is really aiming to prevent kids from falling victims to internet predators. One of the things that we do need is we need to ensure that in our budgets that we are including monies for the Internet Crimes Against Children Fund, which is so vital and important to keep our kids safe online. We've seen throughout the pandemic that there's just been an explosion of online predators that are targeting children. And you bring up previously you brought up a really interesting point that I've been saying all along here. One of the hardest votes for me last year. And it wasn't hard in terms of pressing that no button because I hated the bill, but it was hard knowing that the bill was going and indeed did pass. And essentially what the bill did was it made it legal to solicit sex with the intent of prostitution. And so it essentially made soliciting sex or prostitution, it made it legal, right? By saying it's not illegal, it makes it illegal. And one of the things that some of the things that our officers often find as a tool in their tool belt for intervening in human trafficking, or child abduction, whatever scenario, is being able to stop somebody and to question them for appearances of solicitation. Do you think that if this bill is signed by the governor, we will see, human trafficking go up? We will see more women fall into this cycle of abuse and prostitution?
Absolutely. I firmly believe that. Again, it's a horrible tragedy. I mean, the media glorifies prostitution, starting with movies like, Pretty Woman and other things. Everybody pimps up hose down parties, and people don't really understand how ugly it really is. Solicitation of prostitution, if you go on the libertarian aspect, adults do what adults do. But sometimes those adults aren't making conscious decisions. They're doing it out of fear of violence, or their fear of violence, or they're addicted to drugs and they need their fix, their money. It's not as clear cut and romanticized that the media wants to put it out to be, especially around times of Super Bowl, All-Star games, things like that. The prostitution in the area increases significantly around the hotels. And many times we know these girls and sometimes boys are kidnapped, they're held against their will. With the legalization of prostitution, the solicitation of prostitution, it takes a tool away from law enforcement to be able to detain someone and get them out of that dangerous circumstance and provide them with options and opportunities for help. And that's the real issue.
So Dave, I want to move on a little bit to the defund the police movements. The past couple of years have just been so intense, toxic, hard, because of the pandemic, but because of this defund the police movement. Our law enforcement put everything on the line every single day to protect our families. Quite literally, men and women have lost their lives to protect our communities, to save, our neighbors, our family. And the movement, what has the movement, in your perspective, to double question here? One, what has it done to officer morale, which is so vital in anybody, right? Nobody wants to go to work where their boss hates them or where their boss is saying, I'm going to cut your pay, right? Nobody wants to go to work in that atmosphere. But also, there's been actually departments that have lost resources, that have lost money, and they try and skirt around where that money went or where it's being repurposed for. But what has the movement done to morale, and what has actually cutting resources done to departments?
It's killed morale. It absolutely has killed morale. 2 weeks ago, we lost 19 officers. Some left the state, some left just the area, and some left the profession altogether. It's actually devastated this profession. Our recruitment is we can't get officers to do this job nationwide. It's dangerous. It's putting people at risk. The anti-police sentiment, the extreme anti-police sentiment, is putting officers' lives in jeopardy. We've had more officers killed this year in ambush-style attacks than we've had in recent years. During the height of it, the Portland police station was set on fire. The doors were chained. It was set on fire with officers inside the building. It's out of control, and we need to come to a reasonable point. We can disagree, we can discuss, we can debate on how to do police work in a way that keeps everybody safe, citizens as well as officers. If officers do something that's illegal, immoral, or unethical, then they should be called out and held accountable for that. If there are ways of police departments improving service and keeping the public safe, we're all about listening and doing that. But on the other side also, there has to be reasonable and honest discussion. And unfortunately, that's something that's really been missing out of these discussions, the anti-police defund movement, taking money away and having social workers do police jobs. The reason why police are the de facto responders to what may seem like a very innocuous call, like a loud party, is because you don't know what's going on in that loud party, or a mental illness call, homeless, mentally ill transient that's having an outburst in the park. The reason why officers show up is because they have the training and tools to be able to control that situation. We go through countless hours of de-escalation training, alternative ways of responding other than using force. But at a certain point, unfortunately, sometimes force needs to be used to keep that person safe, as well as the officers, as well as the citizens. Having a social worker respond, LAPD has that. We have what's called the mental evaluation unit. So officers will respond to render the situation safe, and then another officer in plain clothes will respond with the social worker to try to identify mental illness and sources of help for that person. But unfortunately, the situation can be very volatile, and officers have to respond to keep that person safe. No officer goes out there wanting to hurt anybody. And that's also something that the defund movement says, that we just want to go out and hurt people. We don't care about the community. We're violent. We're racist. And that's just not the case. We welcome to have conversations. We go on panels all the time. I'm not trying to convince you that we're the good guys. We'll have open and honest discussions about things that we could improve on. Absolutely.
So it's interesting because now I've heard this quite a bit. So the defund the police just movement, even for departments that didn't see a real slash in their budgets, the slash in the morale was just as devastating because of retirements, because of an inability to hire new recruits. And also, what I'm hearing from my friends who work in, various departments, there's a huge shortage, right? You have people retiring, but you're not replacing them. So there's a shortage. So, one of my friends can't get to the vast majority of their cases, their detective, because guess what? They're being repurposed in other areas to be on the streets, right? So it's just, I'm sorry, but if you are a rape victim, this defund the police morale has affected the ability of your case to be solved. If you were a victim of violence, if you were a victim of domestic violence, or if you were a victim of robbery, property theft, smash and grabs, businesses are being vandalized, all of this has affected the ability to bring justice and law and order to our communities, which leads me to smash and grabs. Which is, we do have Robert here, Rivera, on Facebook. He said, what are you doing to repeal Prop 47? Dave, can you just explain to everyone what Prop 47 is and how it is connected to smash and grabs?
Prop 47 was a bill that was passed approximately, what are we going on, 5 years now, called Safer Communities and Schools Act, which was ironic because it did everything except that. It reduced penalties. It reduced some felonies to misdemeanors, some misdemeanors to infractions. It also increased the level of shoplifting from $450 to $950. So you could shoplift up to $950 and receive a ticket, where before that would have been a felony. Also, it changed the petty theft with a prior law. So if you were convicted of shoplifting 2 other prior times, your third time is going to be treated as a felony. And it was to prevent, chronic shoplifting rings, things of that nature. That took care of all that. It eliminated that. And unfortunately, we're seeing the smash and grabs. We're seeing people just walking into, in fact, if you remember the video of TJ Maxx when we were out of Hills, walked right in, grabbed a whole bunch of stuff, walked out without a care in the world. There's no fear of repercussions. They know that they're just going to get a ticket. They're going to be told to appear in court. Most of the time, they're not going to appear in court. The warrant will be issued for their arrest. They'll get booked again, then get released again, and given another court date. It's a vicious cycle, and that's why we're seeing the increase that we're seeing, especially with the smash and grabs, flash mob mentality. And then again, officers, because to go back to the anti-police or the defunding movement, officers are a little bit gun shy, pun intended, I guess, to actually engage and really go after, because they're really concerned about getting into uses of forces and being the next officer on camera fighting with someone and saying that mean officer beat that guy up for no reason, et cetera, et cetera. We do have issues with uses of forces. They're investigated thoroughly. We have body-worn video. We have numerous, security cameras all over the place that record all this stuff. These aren't just checkboxed and received and filed. They're investigated thoroughly. But officers are afraid of engaging because of that.
So The question that I guess maybe Robert was asking me is, what are you doing to repeal Prop 47? There's been a lot of bills in the legislature that have really, there's one bill by Kevin Kiley that aimed to overturn Prop 47. I'm even thinking that bill did get a hearing, but it didn't pass public safety. Rudy Salas had another bill which would have brought down that $950 back down to the original $450. That bill was shot down. But we did recently vote on a bill. It's AB, let me just make sure I get the number right, 2356, which would codify case law and make it easier for coordinated smash and grabs on retail stores to be prosecuted against with harsher penalties. That did pass. I voted yes on that. That passed the state assembly floor. It's on to the Senate now. Hopefully we can move that forward. But in my opinion, it wasn't honestly as aggressive enough. I also feel like, my brother had a 10-year addiction to drugs. And growing up in a house with a drug addict, I was a teenager at the time. He's, 4 or 5 years older than I am. I look back to some of the behaviors and I now associate it with smash and grabs, drug addiction, and homelessness. Living in a home with a drug addict. I remember times my brother would come to my house and be like, he was there that week and say, hey, you want to buy this Palm Pilot? So it was a long time ago, Palm Pilots were around. And I'm like, no, I don't want to buy a Palm Pilot. I'm 16. What do I need Palm Pilot for? Or trying to sell me other things that I would say no. And then I remember like my new shoes disappeared one day and my brother's new pants disappeared. And it's drug addicts need to steal to hack whatever they stole to pay for their addiction. I can imagine we have this perfect storm with Prop 47, with a DA that fails to actually prosecute anything, and homelessness. So what are you guys seeing on the streets in terms of homelessness and the relation between homelessness and crime?
There's the separation of criminal homeless, and mentally ill homeless, and people that are down and out on their luck. Most of the time, the people that are down and out on their luck try to keep to themselves. They're not out there causing quality of life issues in the neighborhood. They're trying to keep a low profile, trying to get back on their feet. Then you have the criminal homeless that are out there, shoplifting, stealing, robbing people, selling drugs, doing drugs, creating disturbances. And then you have the mentally ill that are kind of in between. They're not so much criminal, but they do commit crimes because of their inability to control themselves. They're on drugs. And one thing that Prop 47 did was took away, again, some of the tools that law enforcement had to get them out of that situation. We had diversion for a while. That was, and I'm trying to remember the number for that, but we had diversion. So if someone was arrested for being under the influence, you had a choice of going to rehab or going to jail, and having your sentence diverted or diverted. So we lost that, and it was working. I mean, crime was going down for a while. In these last couple of years, I mean, you could see crime has just been gone through the roof. There are no consequences for criminal activity. And then to kind of bring on, we've had a lot of shootings and gun-related crime. We have a lot of gun control laws on the books already, but we have a DA here in Los Angeles that's not filing the enhancements. We have ghost guns that are proliferating in the streets right now, and people aren't getting charged appropriately. If I commit a robbery with a gun, there should be an enhancement with a gun, but that's not being filed, so it's just like a regular robbery. So we're seeing a lot of these issues. And as far as the homeless issue, I don't understand how your city government refuses to enforce laws or fight injunctions that don't allow the city to control their public ways so that people don't have to walk out in the streets. I used to work Central Division, Skid Row, and we had mothers wheeling their strollers in the streets because the tents took over the sidewalks in front of schools. I just don't understand that. I'm not saying that, we should lock people up forever for being homeless or minor crimes to be, no, it needs to be appropriately taken care of. And we're not having any of that right now. There are no consequences. And again, to go back to the smash and grabs and the shopliftings and some of the catalytic converters that are being stolen, we're not seeing the consequences. People aren't afraid of it. They know they're going to get away with it.
Dave, I'm so frustrated. I'm a citizen legislator. I ran for state assembly because I have a 5-year-old daughter. I don't want to leave the state, but things have got to change. My daughter turned 5 on April 14th. It was spring break. I decided to take her to the Santa Monica Pier, and she wanted to be on a Ferris wheel. But let me tell you, I had a blast with her because it was her big birthday and we were spending the day together. But in the back of my head, I was just so afraid. Between driving to get there and seeing, the homeless population, the transients on the corner, knowing that Santa Monica is one of the, most crime-ridden places in LA right now. I don't even know why. I really thought it was a good idea to take her. I was clutching my purse the entire time. I was clutching her hand the entire time. And I was thinking, if somebody grabs your purse, give it to them, hold on to your daughter. We shouldn't have to feel this way, where you're afraid to just go have a fun time at a park with your child. And whether it is the $0 bail, whether it is early release, which was we know a lot of the crimes that are violent crimes and murders that are taking place in LA and across the state are tied to early release. Whether it is a DA in our own Los Angeles County that won't prosecute, that doesn't believe in gang enhancements, but also a legislature that voted to get rid of gang enhancements. I grew up around, in an area where there were gangs. Gangs are not good. They are organized, and gang enhancements exist for a reason. How can we get back on track so that moms like myself can feel safe? And I don't know that there will ever be a day where I will ever in my daughter's entire life allow her to play outside by herself. I don't see that in her future. But I'd love, maybe in my grandchildren's future, how do we get back on track?
Unfortunately, the pendulum swings, and there was an old saying, good times create soft men and hard times create strong men. That was the saying. And we've had some good times. We've had low crime rates, and people kind of forgot what it's like to be a victim, unfortunately. And a lot of these good intended laws where you want to give someone a second chance and a third chance to do right, we're now starting to see that they don't work. Also, our systems, I think, need to be reevaluated. Do we necessarily have to put people in jail or prison? You got someone that's done a second DUI that's going to serve 6 months in county jail. Very, very dangerous place for someone that's like a businessman and not a gangster. Someone who is just your average citizen and she has a drinking problem maybe and got arrested for the second time. Should she be going to a very dangerous place, or should there be some other place with rehab? Same thing with your drug addicted people. You mentioned your brother. I can only imagine how difficult that is, having someone like that. It's so difficult to watch someone self-destroy and not being able to help them. Do we put people in jail for small possessions of drugs, small quantities? I don't think so. I think there are other ways. And unfortunately, I think the public has been misled with Prop 47, Safer Schools and Communities Act, Prop 57. I think the voter is really uninformed. They see a title, they vote for it. I think people are too aligned with their party affiliation sometimes, where they just vote all the way down D or R, rather than knowing who really is running. I think people inherently, want to do good. That's why they want to give someone like George Gascon a chance to try to revamp the criminal justice system and give people a chance. But obviously, we're seeing the policies not working out the way they're intended. We're seeing a lot more crime. We're seeing a lot more victims. I think people have to draw a line in the sand. Yes, we want to help people, but also there's a responsibility on the person's part to want to be helped. Violent crime, we should not be tolerating that. The poor nurse that was knocked down waiting for a bus, that was the ER nurse, and died 2 days later of head trauma, that person should not have been out. When you have someone with a 30-page rap sheet, that person's kind of already proven to society that they can't play well in the sandbox. And I don't think society should be giving that person another chance as opposed to that poor woman who wants to go to work and help people. I think there's a choice. Or the girl that got stabbed to death in the furniture store by a transient. Right after that, he walked out, didn't care, went and bought a vape pen at a 7-Eleven, like it was just part of his day. We can't have that. And again, I think the public is misled. And, again, I blame the media. Sorry, I'm going off. The LA Times, calling them out there, just report honest truth, report honesty, and let people make up their own mind. Whether you're honest about the police saying that you're wrong and you're doing something bad, well, if it's the truth, well, then I need to shape up. But that goes on both sides. And that's in a nutshell. How do we get back to it? We need to be more honest.
So Dave, I totally agree. I mean, crime is not partisan. I can guarantee you somebody who's going to steal your wallet is not asking if you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's not partisan. But how can people be more informed? Does LAPPL share their endorsements on their website? How can people study up about propositions other than going to my webpage too? But what resources does LAPPL offer?
We do put out news articles regarding crime in the area. We do put out stats. We do put out an endorsement list. We're about to do one soon because we just conducted a round of interviews for people that want our endorsement. We're very honored that people do want our endorsement. We don't take that lightly. So yes, we will be putting that out there. Also, the LAPD website, lapdonline.org, has a lot of information on there, honest information. They have a year-end use of force report that breaks down. It's probably a good 300 pages of breaking down uses of force that have occurred in the previous year. It breaks down policy. It breaks down the tools that the police have. Hi. Policy regarding beanbag shotgun, why it's used, when it's used, the taser, how it's used. And again, all the policies, and it breaks down by demographic, use of force, male, female, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, how the crime's being committed, whether the person, it's all there. So the information is all there. And again, some people may be skeptical. Oh, that's coming from the police. They're probably lying. Well, you can feel that way, but it is pretty honest, raw data. So, and then there's the police commission. They're the body that oversees the police department, made up of citizens. We have the Office of Constitutional Policing and the Inspector General's office that monitor the police department. They also put out reports. So those are some good places to go for information that's really not biased. It's there. Unfortunately, things like the LA Times, not so much.
So the moral of the story is do your homework. And I completely believe that Angelenos are fed up. They see the crime. I had a reporter ask me, well, they're saying that, crime really isn't up. And talk to the person that just had their catalytic converter stolen, or somebody whose Amazon packages are going missing from their door, or somebody who was attacked. We're seeing it every day on our streets. It's real. But we do have to be informed as voters. So Dave, I can't thank you enough. We've actually been talking for half an hour. I did not expect us to talk this long. There's just so much to talk to when it comes to one, supporting law enforcement, providing law enforcement the resources they need, addressing the policies that are the reason for the increase in crime. And lastly, you just met my little 5-year-old girl. Being able to create a community that's safe for her and for our families and for every Californian. So thank you so much for jumping on. I'm sure we'll have another conversation really soon.
I hope so. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for your support, law enforcement and public safety. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, y'all. Charlotte is quite, done. She's ready for mama time. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in, for your questions. I hope that if you want to hear about an issue or a topic and us to talk about it here on Facebook Live with some of the experts and professionals, please reach out to me on Facebook. You can also visit my website at SuzetteValladares.com to give me your suggestions. You see, she's ready. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram for more information about what's going on with my campaign. And yes, lastly, okay, baby, can you let mama finish up? I promise. One more minute. We have a big election, primary election on June 7th. You should have received your ballot in the mail this week. If not, you'll get it in the coming days. I hope that you will vote for me, Suzette Martinez Valladares, your Assemblywoman in the 38th, running for re-election in the 40th Assembly District, delivering for you, working hard for you, and for this little one, because our community matters. So see y'all soon.